The domain of astrological magic has a huge issue and one very big problem. Fixed star talismans are something that are actually quite simple once you understand the components of making a planetary talisman. There's a fundamental difference between these two results, and one is better in all cases. Howdy everyone. I received a question today from one of the viewers about wanting some help looking at a fixed star talismanic election. And really there is so much to say about it, and lovingly so. It was also something that's so far out of what I would consider to be like an elected fixed star talisman based off of the tradition of the Picatrix. It's, there's really a lot to say about that. And so because of that, instead of just writing a very long email for only one person to read, I wanted to record this and do a little taste and deep dive into fixed star talismans in general, electing them, their results, and important points to consider. And so I am drawing on some resources that I have made in the past for when I am teaching in my seminars and in my mentorship classes. So this is also a little bit of taste of that. By now, everyone kind of knows my teaching style as well, or at least my sharing style. And I know it's definitely of a lot of benefit. But there is a key point that I really want to drive home. And part of it really is an issue, I would say, with the terminology that practitioners like myself are using. The domain of astrological magic has a huge issue and one very big problem, and it's a terminology problem. The word astrological magic, the word astrological talisman is really quite broad. But people like me and people who practice this kind of magic really are referring to a set of principles and ways of viewing the magical object. People who are viewing the magical object creation process really within the terms and confines of this little book right here, the Picatrix, which is fully fine. But astrological magic is something that is quite beyond that. And there can become an issue when we start trying to adapt certain principles from this book too broadly to other domains. Or at least problems for, people like myself who talk about astrological talismans in a very specific way because we're trying to replicate something very, very specific. And so that is the thing I'm going to be discussing today, is how one can conceptualize and start thinking about making a talisman of a fixed star in the sky akin to the methodologies presented in Picatrix. And hopefully this gives everyone a foundation for understanding when their idea of making an astrological talisman is kind of within this realm of tradition, which means it's within the realm of a expected scope of results and expected mechanism versus not. And there's tons of other forms of magic that is about creating very similar things, and even things that are called the same thing, which is also fine to do. But it certainly puts me in an interesting position as an authority on the subject and someone who has been practicing this a lot. When someone is asking, well, what do you think about this election? What do you think about making this kinds of talisman? And there's multiple different ways for me to answer that. In terms of mage to mage, individual to individual, we can all make the talismans that we want to do. And I think this is why a general recommendation is you should learn how to make your own talisman. Yes, I sell talismans. Yes, I have friends that sell talismans. Great, cool. For me, this is really a byproduct of me talking about them all the time. People are like, oh, I want the one that you made. And I don't want to spend the time to learn how to make it. Or I'm having a hard time learning about it. Or, damn, Josh, everyone tells me to buy the Picatrix, but it reads like a medieval microwave repair manual, which it does, lovingly. I need help. And so that's why I have my classes. That's why I run my mentorship. That's why I'm making a different kinds of class. And this is really a preamble to some more videos I'm going to be making, just giving people some of the fundamentals to understand what is it that this book is even talking about? What is it? What is it even maybe attempting to be creating? And so we understand, yes, this is the kind of magic I want to get into. I want a very technical, specific form of magical object creation that I feel very compelled to learn how to do for whatever the reason is. Maybe it's cosmological. Maybe you like the mechanism. Maybe this just happens to be your specific fixation for the moment. But there's plenty of ways to make a gem a magical object. There's plenty of ways to do magic with the planet. This is just one of the ways. And it's And it just happens to be the way I spent, gosh, at this point now, like 9 years of my life trying to perfect. And I'm definitely far from that. But as you know, we've gotten some really cool stuff happening. So with that being said, let us go on to the principles of making a Picatrix style talisman in general, and then we will segue into electional considerations for a fixed star talisman. All right, first slide. So materials very much matter. And not just the materials themselves of what the talisman is made out of, but the lines of thinking, the understanding of the lining up of the esoteric virtues, the occult virtues of the materials as they relate to the significator of the talisman. So we want the materials of our talisman to mirror the nature or end goal of the star that we are planning to make the talisman of. And we want that to align to whatever our end goal or our desire is that we're looking for the talisman to produce. This form of magic very much asserts that whatever our ideas are around what we'd like to happen are not the thing that is taking supremacy. We cannot take a lump of clay and write the glyph of Mars on it and assume that's going to create a pound for pound equal talisman with a measurable result than if we chose to use a ruby or a piece of iron and used a Mars glyph and make a talisman using those two components. It asserts that there's a fundamental difference between these two results, and one is arguably better in all cases. And then we add a third component, simply, and that is the moment of time, or the election. And the kinds of criteria we use to evaluate that moment of time is going to influence both, number one, the efficacy, how powerful a talisman is, and then two, like its direction, maybe even its corruptibility. How optimal is it from taking you from point A to point B? Is it a straight line with no detours? Is it a roundabout way? Are there any unintended consequences along the lines or along the way of the results the talisman is bringing into your life? These are all aspects which can be contingent onto the election, and everyone has different opinions about it. And then finally, the individual who's performing the election does matter, like the mage, 1,000,000,000% matters. And specifically, this is directly from the text. Here's an example. When you wish to make and consecrate a magical image, consider the purpose and shape in which you wish to make the image, as well as the material of which you intend to make and consecrate it. Let the aforesaid thing to be in correspondence to one another, and let them reflect the powers and influence of the planet that rules the working. When it is fashioned in this way, the image will be powerful and complete, and its effects will follow and be manifest. And the spirit that has been placed in the magical image will be apparent in its effects. Those who fashion magical images but are ignorant of the foregoing make them badly. So here we go. A good talisman, as defined by the text, is one that is aligned, both in materiality, both in intention and perspective, and with the correct images and timing akin to the planetary body or stellar body, the star in which the talisman is supposed to be made. So just kind of thinking about making a talisman as a grab bag of whatever it is that we kind of want or we think could work, this really is not the form of magic for that line of thinking at all. Maybe it is. Maybe you do that and you make it and it still is a talisman. Sure, you can call it whatever you want. But in terms of what Picatrix is talking about, for a lot of people that watch my channel and practice this magic, it is talking about something specific. And we kind of have a very bad handle of the terminology overall, wide scope, and nature of the beast, which is why it's important to learn from people who have been doing it, so you can kind of slice through all of the slice through the delusion, slice through the opaqueness of the tradition. And so, and the point of this slide in mentorship, really, because fixed star talismans are something that are actually quite simple once you understand the components of making a planetary talisman. So I taught this at the end in the last cohort, and you just need to remember everything that you know about making planetary talismans, everything that you've practiced to make them incredibly well. You need to be importing that into your understanding of fixed star talents, plus some other bonus fun rules and considerations. And then to date myself, I have made Aldebaran fixed star talismans. That was the first one I ever made, and Capella. I absolutely love Capella. Saved me from like a terrible respiratory illness that I had for like 2 years. And it was like that thing, boom, cleared up. I got the medicine that I needed. The doctor found something that they had like overlooked. And now I no longer get like seasonal terrible chest infection allergies. So that was like absolute peak. Regulus, Algol, Fogelhall, and Menkar. Oh my gosh, wow. Menkar talisman, Fixar talisman, really dislike it. Fogelhall also is a talisman I very much dislike. Not good. I'll have to make a video on that. I'm planning to do a talisman fails video as well. And then Algol and potentially Spica, depending on your definition. I haven't done a standalone Spica talisman, but it was a Venus conjunct Spica talisman done in the manner of Venus. So I think you could make a case that it's impossible to fully separate the fixed star influence of Spica in that Venusian Venus and Libra conjunction, and that fully transformed my life. Then if you do some calculations between the one's nakshatra, or nakshatra literally is a Sanskrit word for fixed star in the world of fixed star magic, you can reckon the distance a fixed star is from either one's natal moon or one's natal rising sign or any other point of interest, and the fixed star talisman will actually give you specific benefits based off of that. I have a friend, Dira Oslin. They're doing tons of research on this. They're the ones that tipped me off to this. And looking back at the talismans I made, it's like, boom, okay, fixed star talismans clearly are working in this way. You could also work with these powers in the same way that you could use mantra or ritual or offerings to the lords of those stars. So we know a lot about fixed stars here. So fixed star talismans are just like one way, one angle. And in everything I just talked about, depending on what your goal is, it all needs to line up. It all needs to line up. The materiality, the timing, the goal you're looking to achieve, and then like who you are as the practitioner. Sometimes who you are as a practitioner is making sure you have your head on straight and like are understanding the scope of what the talisman is actually doing and how it's interacting with the with just like the over cosmology of reality. Other times it's reckoning your own natal placements to intelligently understand and design the perfect fixed star talisman based off of your goal, because you can also do that, which is like a certain specific kind of way. Now we're kind of getting into my own methodology of how I would recommend someone even thinks about optimally determining which fixed star talisman is best for them, which even a little bit, strays a bit from the Picatrix tradition purely, but not necessarily. We're not here to really talk about the scope of the tradition of Picatrix. Here we can do that later. But I want to wrap this up soon because this is supposed to be a short video. We're not going to talk a lot about this. Beginning of fixed stars, most famous kinds of fixed stars. Lots of people talk about this. Fixed star elections. So this is great. As anyone who's really doing this magic from this tradition, it's all coming down from a lot of Chris Warnock's books and his translations, which is excellent and quite good. So what do we want? We want the fixed star rising or culminating. The moon. So this is the election for fixed stars. So what does the chart of the time look like? Fixed star rising or culminating. Makes sense. We want the moon applying to conjoin sextile or trine the fixed star. This is like the big wrinkle. So this is what's listed in the book. This is what Chris stands behind. I don't see people making fixed star talismans where the moon is anything but the moon being conjunct the star. Pretty much all of the talismans, the moon is always conjunct the star. I have only ever made fixed star talismans with the moon conjunct the star. Early on. Me and one of the first friends that I had when we were starting to do this in like 2015, 2016, I know they had attempted at least once or twice with Aldebaran, I believe, making a moon talisman, making a fixed star talisman where the moon was just applying to the star, sextile trine. And then lots of discourse talking about the disappointment in the efficacy of fixed star talismans where the moon wasn't conjunct. To this point, that narrative has been so strong. The average person or election you see posting a fixed star election, the moon is going to be conjunct the star. And if it's not, everyone is just going to rip into you about how dare you do that, or something along those lines, which I don't think is really charitable, because you technically could. But in terms of like risk and reward and making the most out of any of these elections, moon conjunct the star. If you're in a pinch, applying via sextile or trine is worth considering. Chris also lists moon waxing or waning as appropriate. If you are making the talisman for something that you want increasing, you have a waxing moon, something that you want to decrease in your life, waning moon. I'm an individual. I care very little about lunar phase. I care very little about lunar phase because as someone who's made nearly 500 talismans, at least over really dozens of elections, lunar phase is not something I've used to stop from making a talisman. I will let other considerations kill the election, so to speak. And I have never been so disappointed with any of the talismans that I've made that I was able to nail down must have been the lunar phase. Now, I definitely get it. Some people don't have a lot of money or they're limited on resources and they're really trying to over-engineer the situation. But I think people really don't understand and they underestimate the value of a talisman that's working at 30 to 60% efficacy and what that does for one's life. If there is an area of your life that was just operating 30 to 60% better, with more luck, more favorable outcomes, with you not having to do anything, that's a tremendous bonus. And because of that principle, I don't really care about moon phase. And then we need the moon and fixed star unafflicted. Very basic principles. If you watched any of my other videos, I go into this in detail. And yeah, exactly. And then we're using 1.5 to 2 degree conjunction of the moon and the fixed star. And then I wanted to share just one example that we go over in the class when I teach this of a fixed star talisman that I made. This is my Regulus talisman that I made around pandemic times. And so the moon is conjunct Regulus on the midheaven. And then, you know me, I love a very strong ascendant lord. We can see the condition of the ascendant. Scorpio ascendant, lord of Scorpio is Mars. Damn, look at that, Mars in Aries. We're gonna have a nice strong talisman. Rock. So we can feel pretty confident about that. Lunar speed 2 is at almost 14.5 degrees of average daily motion. This is a fast move. So we're expecting results to be punchy, quick, and quite lovely. And then although moon is sharing the sign of sun in Leo, it's far enough away for it not to be combust. Mars does square Mercury, but who really cares? Mars is way stronger than Mercury and is going to be grinding it to dust. There's not going to be any complaint there. So let us see what even happened. Bada bing, bada bing. So the traditional description of this talisman of the Bohemian fixed stars and Quindecim Stellus, Hermes on the 15 fixed stars, talks about celandine juice with wormwood and mastic, takes away anger and melancholy, makes men temperate and grants favor, and the stone is garnet. So went ahead and I got a bunch of garnet cabochons and some great celandine and wormwood that I pulverized into juice. They still were a little bit juicy. Burned all that and mastic for the incense and put a mixture of that underneath the stone. What happened after that? So soon after I made this, a couple weeks after, I received a huge industry award for the corporate work I was doing in the Amazon Web Services community as an inaugural member of their community builder. I have built community organizations my entire career. And the Regulus talismans have, always worked alongside in that fashion. And then in terms of popularity, the company that I was running, this ended up contributing to us having one of the global ranking serverless podcasts. Serverless is a form of cloud computing, a methodology of cloud computing. So we went ahead and had some incredible success there. The popularity of my talisman making business, Seller Talismans, at the time really did start to pick up steam and pop off. And I began talking and lecturing more on the topics of astrological magic, including being an inaugural member at the Astromagia conference, which JD Kelly runs, and was on a Malefic Magic panel with Austin Kopic, Frank Civilli, Chris Warnock, and Allison Tchaikovsky. So that was quite fun. I know other individual stories. I think Tony and Austin have one about Regulus, where Regulus grants fame in public eye when one is not as ready or interested in it. This was fully my case. So despite it, kind of working well, it was something I really did not really want to balance too often with all my other responsibilities. But the important part, seeing the steel thread through all these points, so much of an emphasis, there's much more of an emphasis in this narrative of my case study and making this talisman of what is traditional based off of the texts and what is the result as based in the text, and then making sure there is an election that matches that. Realistically, maybe I could have done a much better job at, focusing down the area that I would have wanted. I wanted me to become more favorable in the public opinion, in the public eye. I think actually I could have done a lot better on that. I would say a lot of the talismans that I make, I do have an approach which is very much more driven by the moment of time because it's so rare and the quality of materials, and then understanding that, whatever happens is going to be, making the ambient life force around me 30, 60, maybe even 200% better. And so that's what I'm shooting for. And then I can use my own intelligence later to grind through all the details. So I hope you enjoyed. This is a little quicker video, just giving some more very basic foundational principles of understanding that, if you want me to comment on an election, or if you want me to comment on a set of principles, like when I am making talismans or I'm making a fixed star talisman, this is the realm of what I'm doing. So if you don't want an answer that will give you something like this, I may not be the best person to ask, or my answer is going to be less critical. It's going to be more along the lines of, yeah, those sound like a nice smattering of symbols and components together. Yeah, you can make it and see what happens. I'm not going to tell somebody who wants to pray a certain way that they shouldn't be doing that. That's not my thing. Though if someone is approaching me and they are asking, Josh, I want to understand this specific method in this specific way, I'm absolutely your guy for that. So much so, I'm a Buddhist Lama. There are people who their primary relationship with me is, I'm very interested in this concept and methodology of Vajrayana Buddhism, as it was traditionally practiced, because I'm interested in the end goal, that one taste, the fruit of awakening. Can you help me with that? And then I say, oh, absolutely. This is the methodology. It's hard. It's not easy, but you can learn it. And if you stick with it, you get the fruits of the practice. Same thing with Picatrix. Same thing with astrological magic. There is a methodology. It's well-defined. If you follow it, then you will get results, and you will get the results that are promised in practice. And it doesn't just automatically happen. Some people are better at it than others, but it's not an unknowable thing, and it's not something that you have to reinvent. And it's generally not something where your initial ideas, without consulting the text and the culture in which it comes from, are able just to figure out something better. Without any other inputs. But if you can do that, you should just be doing that. Way easier than reading a medieval microwave repair manual, so to speak. Anyway, I hope this was beneficial. Please let me know what you think, and hope you enjoyed the next video in this series.